Settle into the Sleepy Mind channel. Tonight, we explore bananas. If you enjoy these kinds of factual stories, like and subscribe for more. New videos are posted weekly. Let us begin. Bananas are one of the most familiar foods in the world, yet almost every part of how they grow is different from what would normally be expected. The plant that produces them is not a tree. The fruit contains no developed seeds, and each visible stem produces fruit only once before being replaced from below. Despite this, bananas are grown in more than 130 countries and are eaten in quantities that place them among the most consumed foods on Earth. Their consistency in markets suggests simplicity, yet that produces them depends on precise environmental conditions and a repeating cycle that operates largely out of view. The earliest bananas developed in parts of Southeast Asia and the Western Pacific, in regions that now include areas of Papua New Guinea and Indonesia. These early forms were filled with large, hard seeds and were not immediately suited for eating in the way modern bananas are. Over time, plants that produce softer fruit with reduced seed development were selected and replanted, gradually shaping the varieties that are now widely grown. As people moved between regions, banana plants moved with them. They spread across tropical Asia, into Africa, and later into the Americas, where they became part of agricultural systems in climates that remain warm and stable throughout the year. This expansion did not happen quickly. It developed over long periods, with the plant adapting to each new environment where conditions allowed it to grow continuously. Today, bananas are most commonly associated with a single type found in global trade, yet this represents only a small part of their diversity. Hundreds of varieties exist, each with differences in size, texture, and use. Some are soft and sweet, while others are firm and starchy, requiring cooking before they are eaten. Within the fruit itself, nutrients are present in a form that is easily used by the body. Bananas contain potassium, which plays a role in maintaining normal muscle contraction and fluid balance. They also provide vitamin B6, which supports energy metabolism and nervous system function. As the fruit ripens, starch is gradually converted into sugar, changing both taste and texture without altering the structure of the fruit itself. This ripening process continues after harvest. Bananas are typically picked while still firm, and then allowed to ripen later through the action of ethylene, a natural plant hormone. This allows the fruit to be transported over long distances while still developing the characteristics associated with maturity. At a glance, bananas appear uniform. Their shape, color, and use remain consistent across regions. But beneath that consistency is a system built on repetition and replacement. Each visible plant grows quickly, produces fruit once, and is then replaced by new growth emerging from below the soil. This continuous cycle allows production to continue without interruption. While one part of the plant completes its role, another is already developing. The process does not reset. It moves forward through overlap, maintaining a steady supply shaped by conditions that remain largely unseen. Before the fruit is harvested, transported, or consumed, it exists as part of this repeating system. Its development is shaped by rapid growth, controlled ripening, and a structure that replaces itself over time, linking each banana to a process that extends far beyond what is visible at the surface. From this point, the structure of the banana plant becomes easier to follow by looking beyond what is immediately visible. What appears above the ground is only one stage in a larger system that continues beneath the soil, where growth is organized and repeated. The banana plant does not form a true trunk. Instead, its upright structure is made from layers of tightly wrapped leaf bases that create a firm, cylindrical column. This structure, known as a pseudostem, supports the height of the plant and holds the leaves in position, but it is temporary. It is built to complete a single cycle of growth rather than persist year after year. Each new leaf begins as a tightly rolled form emerging from the center of the pseudostem. As it rises, it unfurls into a wide surface that captures light efficiently. These leaves are large and thin, allowing them to exchange gases and release moisture while maintaining a steady flow of water through the plant. The arrangement of leaves creates a layered canopy, with newer leaves forming at the top and older ones remaining below. Beneath the soil, a different structure carries the continuity of the plant. The banana grows from a rhizome, a thickened underground stem that stores energy and produces new shoots. This rhizome remains active even as the visible plant above completes its cycle. It sends up new growth at intervals, ensuring growth continues without needing to begin again from seed. Because of this, banana plants develop in groups rather than as isolated individuals. Multiple stems of different ages grow from the same rhizome, forming a connected cluster. One stem may be fully developed and carrying fruit, another may still be expanding its leaves, and a third may be just emerging from the soil. These stages overlap, allowing it to remain active. This method of growth creates genetic uniformity across cultivated plants. New shoots are not separate organisms in the way seed-grown plants are. They are extensions of the same original plant, sharing identical genetic material. This consistency allows for predictable growth and uniform fruit, but it also means that all plants respond similarly to environmental stress or disease. As the plant grows, water and nutrients move upward from the roots through the pseudostem. This flow is continuous and supports both the formation of new leaves and the maintenance of existing ones. Because the plant develops quickly, this movement remains active, sustaining the rapid expansion that defines its early stage. The pace of growth is closely tied to temperature and moisture. In warm, stable conditions, the plant continues producing leaves without interruption. Each new leaf emerges, expands, and joins the layered canopy, contributing to the overall energy production of the plant. This steady input supports the next phase of development. At a certain point, growth shifts direction. Instead of producing new leaves indefinitely, the plant begins forming a flowering structure within the center of the pseudostem. This structure develops gradually, moving upward through the plant until it emerges from the top. When it appears, it forms a long, downward hanging stem. Along this stem, groups of flowers develop in sequence. The earliest of these are female flowers, which will form the fruit. As they mature, they develop into clusters arranged in rows, each row becoming what is known as a hand of bananas. As the fruit begins to grow, its orientation changes. Initially, the developing bananas point downward, following the direction of the stem. Over time, each fruit gradually curves upward as it grows toward available light. This upward curvature creates the familiar shape associated with bananas, formed during development. While the fruit develops, the plant redirects much of its energy toward this single structure. Leaf production slows, and the focus shifts to supporting the growth of the bunch. Water, nutrients, and energy produced through photosynthesis are directed into the developing fruit, allowing it to increase in size and weight. The bunch itself can become substantial, often weighing many tens of pounds. Its weight is supported by the pseudostem, which remains firm despite its temporary nature. The structure holds until the fruit reaches maturity, completing the plant's primary function. At this stage, the role of the pseudostem is nearly complete. Unlike many other plants, it does not continue producing fruit in subsequent cycles. Once the bunch has fully developed, the stem will not produce again. Instead, it gradually declines, having transferred its energy into the fruit. At the same time, new shoots are already growing from the rhizome below. These younger stems draw from the same root system and begin their own development, while the older stem is still present. By the time the mature stem completes its cycle, its replacement is already established. This overlap creates a continuous pattern of renewal. The plant does not rely on a single structure persisting over time. Instead, it replaces each part as it completes its function, maintaining productivity through succession rather than repetition. The root system supports this entire process. It anchors the plant and regulates the movement of water and nutrients. Healthy roots require soil that allows both moisture retention and airflow. When soil becomes too compacted or saturated, root function is reduced, affecting the entire system above. In well-balanced conditions, roots extend outward and downward, creating a stable foundation. This allows the plant to maintain its rapid growth without interruption. Water is drawn upward, nutrients are distributed, and new growth continues forming in sequence. Because the banana plant operates through continuous replacement, there is no clear pause in its activity. Growth, fruiting, and renewal occur simultaneously across different stems. This creates a system that appears stable from a distance, but is constantly changing at a smaller scale. Each visible plant represents a single stage within this larger process. It rises quickly, supports leaf formation, produces fruit, and then yields to the next stage, emerging from below. The cycle continues without requiring a reset, driven by the steady function of the rhizome and root system. The visible form changes, but the underlying system remains active, linking each stage to the next in a pattern that repeats. The banana plant depends on a narrow range of environmental conditions that allow its rapid growth to continue without interruption. Unlike plants that can tolerate wide seasonal variation, it performs best where temperature, moisture, and soil remain stable over long periods. Warmth is the most consistent requirement. The plant grows most efficiently in temperatures that remain within a steady range, where neither heat nor cold create stress. When conditions fall below this range, growth slows quickly, leaf production becomes irregular, and the plant reduces its activity. Exposure to cold can damage the internal structure of the leaves, interrupting the flow of water and nutrients. Frost is particularly damaging. Ice formation within plant tissue disrupts cell walls and prevents normal function. Because the banana plant is composed of soft, water-rich structures rather than dense wood, it has little protection against freezing temperatures. Even brief exposure can halt development or destroy the plant entirely. Moisture works alongside temperature to support continuous growth. The large leaves release water through their surfaces, creating a steady upward movement that pulls water from the roots. This process remains active throughout the day, requiring a consistent supply of moisture in the soil. When water is available, the plant maintains its pace. When it is limited, growth slows and new leaf formation is delayed. Rainfall provides this supply when it is evenly distributed. In regions where rain arrives regularly, the plant does not need to compensate for long dry periods. Water moves through the soil and into the root system at a steady rate, supporting both leaf expansion and fruit development. This balance allows the plant to maintain its structure without interruption. Too much water creates a different problem. When soil remains saturated, air spaces between particles fill with water, reducing the oxygen available to roots. Roots require oxygen to function, and without it, their ability to absorb nutrients declines. This affects the entire plant, slowing growth and reducing the consistency of development. For this reason, soil must drain well while still holding enough moisture to support the plant's needs. A balanced structure allows excess water to move away while retaining what is required for growth. Loose, well-aerated soil supports this balance, providing both stability and access to air. Root systems expand within this environment, spreading outward and downward to draw from a larger area. This distribution helps stabilize the plant and ensures that water and nutrients are available even when conditions shift slightly. A well-developed root system supports consistent growth above ground. Soil composition also influences nutrient availability. Banana plants require a steady supply of minerals to sustain their rapid development. Potassium plays a central role, supporting processes related to water movement and fruit formation. Nitrogen supports leaf growth, while other elements contribute to overall structure and function. When these nutrients are available in balanced amounts, the plant maintains steady development. Deficiencies interrupt this balance, slowing leaf production and affecting the formation of fruit. Because the plant grows quickly, it depends on a continuous supply rather than stored reserves alone. Humidity supports this system by reducing water loss from the leaves. In moist air, evaporation slows, allowing the plant to maintain internal balance without drawing excessive water from the soil. In dry conditions, water loss increases, placing additional demand on the roots and potentially slowing growth. Wind introduces another variable. Strong or persistent wind can tear the large leaves, reducing their effective surface area. This limits the plant's ability to capture light and produce energy. While the plant can continue growing after damage, repeated tearing reduces efficiency and affects overall development. Because of these factors, banana plants are most commonly grown in regions near the equator, where temperature remains stable, rainfall is regular, and humidity is high. These conditions allow the plant to operate without interruption, supporting continuous growth and repeated cycles of fruit production. In less stable environments, growth becomes uneven. Periods of favorable conditions may be followed by slow recovery during less suitable phases. The plant does not compensate by accelerating growth later. Instead, it maintains a pace that reflects current conditions, resulting in variation across stems within the same system. This variation is visible within a single cluster of plants. Some stems may develop quickly under favorable conditions, while others progress more slowly. The system remains active, but its output becomes less uniform. This reflects the plant's dependence on stable conditions rather than its ability to adapt to extremes. Elevation can modify these conditions without disrupting them. In some regions, banana plants are grown at slightly higher altitudes, where temperatures are lower but remain within a suitable range. This can slow growth slightly, extending the time required for development while maintaining overall stability. The plant does not require constant intervention when conditions are suitable. Its structure is designed to operate within a stable environment, using available resources efficiently. When temperature, moisture, and soil remain balanced, growth continues in a predictable pattern. This predictability supports consistent production. As long as the environment remains within range, the plant moves through its cycle without interruption. New leaves form, fruit develops, and replacement shoots emerge in sequence. When conditions shift beyond this range, does not collapse immediately. Instead, it adjusts by slowing down. Growth becomes less frequent, and recovery after fruiting takes longer. The plant preserves its structure rather than forcing activity under stress. This response reflects a balance between speed and stability. The banana plant grows quickly when conditions allow, but it does not sustain that speed under strain. It maintains function, waiting for conditions to return to a level that supports continuous development. Across regions where these conditions are met, the banana plant operates in the same general pattern. Growth remains steady, fruit production continues, and replaces itself without interruption. The environment does not change the structure of the plant, but it determines how smoothly that structure functions. The interaction between warmth, moisture, soil, and air defines the boundaries within which the plant can operate. Inside those boundaries, growth remains continuous. Outside them, slows, but it does not abandon its pattern. This dependence on stable conditions explains why banana cultivation is concentrated in specific regions. The plant requires consistency more than it requires intensity. Where that consistency exists, continues. The banana plant follows a clear sequence of development that moves from emergence to fruiting without repeating within the same stem. Each stage builds on the one before it, forming a cycle that is completed once and then continued by new growth from the same root system. The cycle begins with the emergence of a new shoot from the rhizome. This shoot appears as a tightly formed structure pushing upward through the soil. At this stage, it contains the early layers that will become the pseudostem. Growth is directed vertically, with each new leaf forming within the center and adding to the structure as it expands. As the shoot rises, leaves begin to unfurl one at a time. Each leaf expands fully before the next emerges, creating a steady pattern of development. The plant increases in height as these layers build, forming a stable column that supports further growth. This stage continues until the plant reaches its full size. During this period, the plant focuses on building capacity rather than producing fruit. Leaves capture light and generate energy, while roots draw water and nutrients from the soil. The system strengthens itself, preparing for the transition that will follow. Growth is consistent, with each new leaf contributing to the overall structure. Once the plant has developed enough leaves, the next phase begins internally. A flowering structure forms within the center of the pseudostem, out of view. This structure develops gradually, moving upward as the plant continues its outward growth. The process is not visible until it reaches the top. When it emerges, the flowering structure appears as a downward extending stem. Along this stem, groups of flowers develop in a fixed sequence. The first groups are female flowers, which will become fruit. Each group forms a layer, and these layers are arranged one above the other along the stem. As the flowers develop, they transition into small, developing bananas. Each group expands together, forming a hand. Multiple hands make up the full bunch. The fruit increases in size as it receives water and nutrients from the plant, drawing on the energy produced by the leaves above. During this stage, the plant directs most of its resources toward the developing fruit. Leaf production slows, and the plant shifts its focus. The existing leaves continue to function, supporting the growth of the bunch. Water movement remains active, supplying the fruit as it expands. The timing of this process depends on environmental conditions. In warm, stable climates, development moves steadily from one stage to the next. In less stable conditions, the pace slows. The plant does not skip stages or accelerate to compensate. It maintains a sequence that reflects the environment in which it is growing. As the fruit approaches maturity, its structure becomes more defined. The bananas reach their full size, and the internal composition begins to stabilize. At this stage, the fruit is typically harvested while still firm. This allows it to be transported without damage and ripened later under controlled conditions. After the fruit is removed, the role of the pseudostem is complete. It does not produce again. The structure that supported the plant through its growth and fruiting stage begins to decline. Energy is no longer directed into maintaining it, and it gradually breaks down. At the same time, new shoots from the rhizome continue their development. These younger stems have been growing alongside the mature plant, drawing from the same root system. By the time the older stem completes its cycle, the next one is already established and moving through its own stages of growth. This overlap creates a continuous flow of production. While one stem completes its cycle, another is approaching fruiting, and another is still in early development. The system remains active because each stage is offset in time, allowing for ongoing output without interruption. Management practices often guide which shoots are allowed to develop. Not all emerging shoots are kept. Selecting a limited number of stems helps maintain balance within, ensuring that resources are not divided too widely. This supports stronger growth and more consistent fruit development. Spacing between plants also influences this balance. When plants are too close together, competition for light, water, and nutrients increases. This can slow development and reduce the uniformity of fruit. Proper spacing allows each plant to maintain its cycle without interference. The length of the growth cycle varies depending on conditions, but it generally follows the same pattern. A new shoot develops, expands its leaves, forms a flowering structure, produces fruit, and then declines. The system continues through replacement rather than repetition of the same stem. Because the plant does not rely on seeds, each cycle is connected to the one before it. The rhizome carries forward the same genetic structure, producing new stems that follow the same sequence. This continuity allows for predictable development across generations of plants. This predictability supports large-scale production. When conditions are controlled, the timing of each stage can be anticipated. This allows harvesting and distribution to be organized around the plant's natural cycle, rather than forcing the plant to adapt to external schedules. At the same time, remains sensitive to variation. Changes in temperature, moisture, or soil conditions can alter the pace of development. The plant responds by adjusting its timing rather than changing its structure. The sequence remains the same, but the duration of each stage can shift. Across all stages, the banana plant maintains a balance between rapid growth and controlled development. It builds quickly, but it follows a fixed path. Each stage leads into the next without deviation, forming a cycle that is completed once and then continued by new growth. This cycle defines how bananas are produced. It is not a repeating loop within a single plant, but a sequence that moves forward through successive stems. Each stem completes its role and carries on through the next. The result is a continuous pattern of growth, fruiting, and replacement. The plant does not pause or reset. It progresses through overlapping stages, maintaining a steady flow shaped by the conditions in which it grows. After the fruit has reached full size on the plant, it is typically harvested while still firm and green. At this stage, the internal structure of the banana is developed, but the conversion of starch into sugar has not yet progressed. This allows the fruit to withstand handling and transport without softening or bruising too easily. Once removed from the plant, the banana enters a different phase of its development. Ripening continues outside the plant, driven by ethylene, a natural plant hormone that regulates this process. Ethylene is produced within the fruit itself and spreads through the surrounding environment, triggering a series of internal changes. As ripening begins, starch stored within the banana is gradually converted into simpler sugars. This changes both taste and texture. The fruit becomes softer as cell walls break down, and sweetness increases as sugar content rises. At the same time, the color of the peel shifts as chlorophyll breaks down, revealing underlying pigments. This process does not occur all at once. It progresses in stages, influenced by temperature and the concentration of ethylene in the surrounding air. Warmer conditions generally accelerate ripening, while cooler conditions slow it. Because of this, ripening can be managed to align with transport and distribution. In large-scale systems, bananas are often placed in controlled environments where ethylene levels and temperature are regulated. This allows batches of fruit to ripen at a consistent rate, ensuring uniform appearance and texture when they reach markets. Without this control, ripening would occur unevenly, making distribution less predictable. The timing of ripening is critical. If fruit ripens too early, it may soften before reaching its destination. If it ripens too late, it may not be ready for consumption when needed. Managing this balance allows bananas to move across long distances while still reaching consumers at the appropriate stage. Bananas also influence each other during this process. As they produce ethylene, nearby fruit is affected, accelerating ripening within the group. This shared environment creates a feedback effect, where ripening becomes more coordinated across the batch. Handling plays a role as well. Because the fruit softens during ripening, it becomes more susceptible to damage. Small impacts can disrupt internal structure, leading to bruising and faster breakdown in those areas. Careful handling helps maintain consistency during distribution. Storage conditions continue to influence the fruit after it reaches its destination. Temperature affects how quickly ripening progresses, while exposure to other fruits can alter the rate through shared ethylene. Separating bananas from other ethylene-producing fruits can slow it, while grouping them can accelerate it. Even after reaching a fully ripe state, changes continue. Sugars may continue to concentrate, and the peel may develop darker spots as cellular breakdown progresses. These changes reflect the ongoing transformation of the fruit rather than immediate spoilage. This entire post-harvest phase allows bananas to be transported and distributed on a global scale. By separating growth from ripening, extends the usable life of the fruit while maintaining its quality. The plant produces the structure, and the ripening process completes it. The ability to control ripening allows bananas to move far beyond the regions where they are grown. Unlike many fruits that must be consumed close to where they are harvested, bananas can be picked early, transported over long distances, and then ripened near their final destination. This separation between growth and ripening supports a global system that operates continuously. Large-scale banana production is concentrated in regions where climate conditions remain stable. Warm temperatures, consistent moisture, and suitable soil allow the plant to grow without interruption. In these regions, production does not follow a single annual harvest. Instead, fruit is collected regularly as different plants reach maturity within the same system. Once harvested, bananas enter a transport network designed to maintain their condition. Temperature is controlled to slow ripening without causing damage. If the fruit is cooled too much, its internal processes are disrupted, leading to uneven color and texture. If it remains too warm, ripening begins too early. Maintaining a narrow temperature range keeps the fruit stable during transit. Bananas are typically transported in large quantities, often by ship, moving from tropical growing regions to markets across the world. This movement depends on precise timing. Harvest, transport, and ripening must align so that the fruit arrives at the correct stage for distribution. This system relies on uniformity. Most bananas in global trade belong to a single group known as the Cavendish. These bananas are selected for their durability, consistent size, and ability to ripen predictably under controlled conditions. This makes them suitable for transport across long distances and for sale in a wide range of markets. However, this uniformity comes with limitations. Because the plants are genetically similar, they respond in the same way to environmental pressures. A condition that affects one plant can affect many others in the same way. This creates a level of vulnerability within. Earlier in the history of banana trade, a different variety was widely grown and exported. This variety, known as Gros Michel, was replaced after a disease spread through plantations and reduced its viability for large-scale production. The shift to Cavendish allowed production to continue, but it did not remove the underlying risk. A soil-based fungal disease, often referred to as Panama disease, continues to affect banana production. It spreads through soil and water, entering the plant through the roots and disrupting its internal transport systems. Once present in the soil, it is difficult to remove, making affected areas unsuitable for continued cultivation of susceptible varieties. Because banana plants are grown in connected systems, this type of disease can move through fields over time. Management strategies focus on prevention, containment, and the development of new varieties that can tolerate or resist infection. This process is ongoing, as conditions and strains continue to change. Despite these challenges, the global banana system remains stable due to its structure. Production is distributed across multiple regions, reducing reliance on a single location. Transport networks are designed to adjust to changes in supply, and ripening systems allow fruit to be managed after harvest. Bananas also play a significant role in local consumption within producing regions. While a portion of production enters global trade, a large amount is consumed near where it is grown. In these contexts, different varieties are often used, including types that are not suited for long-distance transport. These local varieties expand the range of how bananas are used. Some are eaten fresh, while others are cooked. Their structure and composition differ from those used in global trade, reflecting local preferences and growing conditions. The global system balances these two roles. It supports international distribution through standardized varieties while maintaining diversity at a regional level. This allows bananas to function both as a widely traded product and as a locally adapted food source. Transport, ripening, and distribution operate together as a continuous process. Fruit moves from field to shipping system, from shipping system to ripening facility, and from ripening facility to market. Each stage is timed to match the next, maintaining consistency across the entire system. Because the fruit continues to change after harvest, delays or disruptions affect its final condition. Timing is not adjusted after the fact. It is managed in advance, with each step planned to maintain the sequence. This coordination allows bananas to remain one of the most accessible fruits worldwide. They appear consistent across locations, even though they originate from specific regions with particular conditions. The system connects these regions to distant markets through controlled movement and timing. At a surface level, it appears simple. Bananas are harvested, transported, and sold. Beneath that simplicity is a structured system that depends on stability, uniformity, and coordination across multiple stages. The fruit itself reflects this system. It develops in one environment, completes its ripening in another, and is consumed in a third. Each stage contributes to its final form, linking growth, transport, and timing into a single continuous process. Beyond the bananas most commonly seen in global markets, a wider range of varieties exists across different regions. These varieties differ in size, texture, and use, reflecting how the plant has adapted to local conditions and preferences over time. Some bananas remain small and soft, developing a high sugar content as they ripen. Others grow larger and retain a firmer structure, containing more starch even at maturity. These starch-rich types are often cooked rather than eaten raw, as heat breaks down their structure and changes their composition. The distinction between these types is not based on separate plant systems, but on variations within the same broader group. Each variety follows the same general pattern of growth, developing from a rhizome, forming a pseudostem, and producing fruit once before being replaced. What changes is the balance between sugar and starch, as well as the texture of the fruit. In some regions, multiple varieties are grown together. This allows for flexibility in use, as different types can be harvested at different stages or prepared in different ways. The plant structure supports this diversity without requiring changes to its underlying cycle. The number of banana varieties is often described in the hundreds. These include types that are rarely exported and remain specific to local environments. Their differences may be subtle, involving slight changes in flavor or texture, or more noticeable, such as variations in color or size. Some bananas develop a deeper yellow color as they ripen, while others may show a slight red or green tone, even at maturity. These differences reflect variations in pigment and internal composition, rather than changes in the overall growth process. Because most cultivated bananas are reproduced through their rhizomes, each variety remains consistent within its group. This allows growers to maintain specific characteristics over time. However, it also means that introducing new traits requires careful selection and propagation. In global trade, the focus remains on varieties that can withstand transport and ripen predictably. This limits the range of bananas that appear in markets far from where they are grown. Many varieties remain local because they do not tolerate handling or long-distance movement as well. Despite this, the underlying system remains the same. Each variety grows within the same structural pattern, shaped by the same environmental requirements. Differences appear in how the fruit develops, rather than how the plant functions. The presence of multiple varieties shows how the banana plant can produce a wide range of outcomes while following a single, consistent process. Each type represents a variation within that process, influenced by selection, environment, and use. In regions where bananas are a primary food source, this diversity supports different roles within daily life. Some varieties provide quick energy when eaten fresh, while others serve as a more substantial food when cooked. The plant's ability to produce both forms within the same system allows it to remain widely used across different cultures. This range does not change how the plant grows, but it changes how the fruit is used. The same cycle of growth, fruiting, and replacement continues, producing outcomes that vary in composition while remaining consistent in structure. Inside the banana, the structure reflects a balance between stored energy and water. Much of the fruit is composed of carbohydrates, primarily in the form of starch when unripe. As the fruit matures, this starch is converted into simpler sugars, changing both the taste and the texture without altering the overall form of the fruit. This conversion is driven by enzymes that become active during ripening. They break long chains of starch into smaller sugar molecules, increasing sweetness while softening the internal structure. At the same time, components within the cell walls begin to change, allowing the fruit to become less firm. These changes occur together, creating the familiar transition from a dense, starchy interior to a softer, sweeter one. Water remains a major component throughout this process. It supports the movement of dissolved substances within the fruit and contributes to its texture. As ripening progresses, the balance between water, sugar, and structural material shifts, producing a consistent change in how the fruit feels and tastes. Alongside carbohydrates, bananas contain smaller amounts of proteins and fats, but their role in the fruit is limited compared to sugars and fiber. The fiber present helps maintain structure and influences how the fruit is processed within the body. In less ripe bananas, resistant starch behaves in a similar way, passing through digestion more slowly and supporting microbial activity in the gut. Minerals are distributed throughout the fruit in forms that are readily absorbed. Potassium is present in higher amounts than many other common fruits. It plays a role in maintaining normal muscle function and regulating fluid balance within the body. This balance supports processes that depend on stable electrical activity, including nerve signaling. Vitamin content includes compounds that support metabolic processes. Vitamin B6 is involved in the conversion of food into usable energy and contributes to normal nervous system function. Smaller amounts of other vitamins are present, each participating in different cellular processes that support overall function. The composition of the banana changes continuously as it ripens. In earlier stages, the fruit is firmer and less sweet, with a higher proportion of starch. As ripening progresses, sweetness increases and texture softens. This transformation does not require external input beyond the conditions that allow the fruit to continue its internal processes. Temperature influences how quickly these changes occur. Warmer conditions accelerate enzyme activity, increasing the rate at which starch is converted into sugar. Cooler conditions slow these reactions, extending the time required for the fruit to reach full ripeness. This allows it to be managed according to need. The peel reflects these internal changes through visible shifts in color. Green pigment decreases as chlorophyll breaks down, revealing yellow tones beneath. As ripening continues, darker spots may appear as localized areas of breakdown develop. These changes indicate progression rather than immediate spoilage. Because bananas continue ripening after harvest, their internal composition at the time of consumption can vary widely. A banana that is just beginning to ripen differs from one that has reached a later stage, even though both originate from the same plant and follow the same development process. This variability allows the fruit to be used in different ways depending on its stage. Firmer bananas may be preferred for certain uses, while softer ones may be selected for others. The underlying structure remains the same, but the balance of its components shifts over time. The internal changes within the banana are not isolated events. They are part of the broader system that begins with growth on the plant and continues through ripening and consumption. Each stage contributes to the final composition of the fruit. From the initial formation of the fruit to the final stages of ripening, the banana undergoes a continuous transformation. This transformation is guided by internal processes that respond to environmental conditions, maintaining a sequence that remains consistent across different stages of development. The result is a fruit that appears simple on the outside, but reflects a series of coordinated changes within. Its composition shifts in predictable ways, shaped by the same processes that govern its growth and development from the plant onward. Beyond its internal composition, the banana also reflects how the plant responds to pressure from its environment. While it is designed for continuous growth, it remains sensitive to disruption. Small changes in soil, water, or surrounding conditions can influence how the plant allocates energy and how the fruit develops. One of the most persistent pressures comes from organisms that interact with the plant at different stages. Insects feed on leaves, roots, and developing structures, while microorganisms exist within the soil and on plant surfaces. Under stable conditions, the plant maintains enough balance to tolerate a certain level of this interaction without lasting damage. When the plant is stressed, this balance shifts. Root function may slow if soil conditions become uneven. Water movement may become inconsistent if moisture is not maintained. These changes do not stop growth immediately, but they reduce the plant's ability to regulate itself. As a result, new growth may become less uniform, and recovery between stages may take longer. Because the banana plant grows quickly, it depends on a steady flow of resources. Any interruption in that flow affects multiple parts of the plant at once. Leaves may develop with reduced efficiency, and fruit may form under less stable conditions. These effects accumulate rather than appearing as a single event. Soil plays a central role in preventing this type of imbalance. Healthy soil supports root activity, allowing water and nutrients to move without restriction. It also contains microorganisms that compete with harmful organisms, limiting their impact. When soil structure is maintained, the plant is better able to sustain its cycle. Water management works alongside this. Consistent moisture supports the upward movement that drives growth. When water becomes irregular, the plant adjusts by slowing development. It does not attempt to compensate by accelerating later. Instead, it maintains a pace that reflects current conditions. Air movement and spacing also influence plant health. When plants are spaced too closely, airflow is reduced, and moisture may remain on leaf surfaces for longer periods. This can increase the likelihood of fungal growth. Proper spacing allows leaves to dry more quickly, supporting stable function. The genetic uniformity of cultivated bananas introduces another factor. Because plants are produced from the same original structure, they respond in similar ways to external conditions. This consistency supports predictable growth, but it also means that challenges affecting one plant can affect many others in the same system. One of the most significant long-term challenges arises from soil-based fungal organisms. These organisms can enter the plant through the roots and interfere with internal transport. Once established in the soil, they can remain present for extended periods, making recovery difficult without changing conditions or plant material. This type of pressure does not always produce immediate visible effects. Instead, it may appear as gradual decline in growth consistency. Leaves may emerge unevenly, and fruit development may become less predictable. Because the plant continues to function, these changes can persist unnoticed until they accumulate. The response to these pressures focuses on maintaining balance rather than applying sudden corrections. Adjustments to soil, water, and spacing help restore stability over time. The plant responds gradually, integrating improved conditions into its cycle. In systems where conditions remain stable, the banana plant maintains a consistent rhythm. Growth follows a predictable sequence, and recovery between stages remains steady. This stability limits the impact of external pressures and supports ongoing production. Across longer periods, the effects of both stability and stress become more apparent. Plants grown under balanced conditions develop more uniform structures, while those exposed to repeated disruption show greater variation. These differences reflect the cumulative impact of environmental interaction. Despite these challenges, the banana plant continues to operate through its cycle of growth and replacement. Individual stems may vary in performance, but as a whole persists. New shoots emerge, fruit develops, and the sequence continues. This persistence reflects the plant's ability to absorb variation without abandoning its structure. It adjusts its pace and output rather than altering its fundamental pattern. The cycle remains intact, even as conditions shift around it. The interaction between plant and environment is continuous. Each stage of growth reflects the conditions present at that time. Leaves, fruit, and replacement shoots all carry the influence of what the plant experienced during their development. Through this interaction, the banana plant remains both stable and responsive. It maintains its structure while adjusting its pace, allowing it to function across a range of conditions without losing continuity. In regions where bananas are grown continuously, this system becomes part of a larger pattern that extends beyond the individual plant. Fields are organized to support ongoing production, with plants at different stages arranged in a way that maintains flow. Planting is often staggered to ensure that not all stems reach maturity at the same time. This creates a distribution of stages across the field, allowing harvesting to occur regularly rather than in a single concentrated period. The system mirrors the plant's internal pattern of overlapping growth. Spacing between plants is designed to balance access to light, water, and nutrients. When spacing is consistent, each plant can develop without excessive competition. This supports uniform growth and helps maintain predictable timing across the field. Maintenance activities are carried out in a steady pattern rather than at fixed intervals. Observations of plant development guide decisions about pruning, thinning, and support. This approach aligns with the plant's continuous cycle rather than imposing an external schedule. Harvesting follows the same principle. Fruit is collected when it reaches the appropriate stage, based on size and development rather than a fixed date. This allows the system to remain responsive to variation while maintaining overall consistency. The structure of the field supports movement and access. Pathways allow workers to move between plants without disturbing root systems or damaging leaves. This preserves the integrity of the system while allowing necessary work to be carried out. Over time, these practices shape the field into a stable environment that supports the plant's natural cycle. Growth, harvest, and replacement occur within a framework that reflects both the plant's biology and the conditions in which it grows. This alignment between plant and system allows production to continue without interruption. The field becomes an extension of the plant's internal structure, supporting its sequence of development across multiple cycles. As each plant completes its cycle, it is replaced by new growth within the same space. The field remains active, with different stages present at all times. This continuity reflects the same pattern seen within the individual plant, expanded across a larger scale. The result is a system that appears steady when viewed from a distance, yet is constantly changing at a smaller level. Individual plants rise and fall within the structure, while the field itself remains productive. This broader organization connects directly to the earlier stages of growth and development. The same processes that guide the formation of leaves and fruit also shape how fields are arranged and managed. The banana plant does not operate in isolation. Its structure influences S built around it, and those systems in turn support its continued growth. Together, they form a pattern that repeats across scales, from the individual plant to the field as a whole. Within this field structure, the timing of each plant remains linked to its stage of development rather than to a fixed calendar. A stem that emerges earlier will reach maturity earlier, while a later shoot follows behind it. This creates a staggered sequence that allows harvesting to continue at a steady rate without requiring all plants to align. Each developing stem carries its own timeline. From emergence to fruiting, the duration depends on temperature, moisture, and nutrient availability. When conditions are stable, this timeline remains consistent. When conditions shift, the duration changes, but the sequence itself remains unchanged. The weight of the developing fruit introduces a structural demand on the plant. As the bunch increases in size, the pseudostem must support a load that can become significant relative to its composition. Because the structure is formed from layered leaf bases rather than dense wood, support is maintained through internal pressure and arrangement rather than rigidity. Water within the plant contributes to this support. The movement of water through the tissues maintains firmness, allowing the pseudostem to remain upright under load. When water availability is reduced, this support weakens and the plant may become less stable. External support is sometimes used to maintain balance as the fruit develops. This may involve positioning or bracing to prevent the plant from leaning or collapsing under the weight of the bunch. These adjustments do not change the plant structure, but help maintain alignment during the final stages of development. The position of the fruit also affects how it develops. As the bunch hangs downward, each hand is exposed to slightly different conditions depending on its location. Upper hands form earlier and may receive more consistent support, while lower hands develop later and may experience slightly different exposure. Despite these differences, the overall structure of the bunch remains consistent. Each hand forms in sequence, and each fruit follows the same pattern of expansion and curvature. The variation between them reflects timing rather than a change in process. As the fruit approaches harvest, its surface remains firm, and its internal structure is still dominated by starch. This firmness protects the fruit during handling and allows it to maintain shape during transport. At this stage, the fruit has reached its full size, even though its internal composition will continue to change. Cutting the bunch from the plant separates it from the continuous flow of water and nutrients. From this point forward, the fruit relies on its internal processes to complete development. Ripening begins to progress based on the conditions it is exposed to, rather than the support of the plant. The removal of the bunch also marks the end of the active phase for the pseudostem. Without the demand of supporting fruit, the structure no longer maintains the same internal pressure. It begins to lose strength as its role is completed. While this occurs, the root system remains active. It continues supplying resources to the younger shoots that are already developing. These shoots draw from the same source, allowing them to continue their growth without interruption. The transition from one stem to the next is not abrupt. The older stem declines gradually, while the new one advances. This overlap maintains continuity, ensuring that the process does not pause between cycles. The consistency of this process allows large-scale systems to remain predictable. Even though individual plants are at different stages, the overall pattern remains stable. This stability supports planning for harvesting, transport, and distribution. At the same time, the system remains sensitive to small changes. A shift in temperature or moisture can alter the pace of development, affecting when a particular stem reaches maturity. These shifts do not change the sequence, but they influence timing within it. This combination of fixed sequence and variable timing defines how the banana plant operates. It follows a set path, but the speed of that path reflects the environment. Each stem completes the same stages, even as conditions vary. Across the field, these individual timelines combine into a continuous flow. Harvesting moves from one plant to another, following the sequence of development rather than a fixed schedule. This maintains a steady output without forcing alignment. The structure of the system supports this movement. Plants are arranged to allow access, and the spacing between them ensures that each can develop without interference. This organization reflects the needs of the plant rather than an imposed pattern. As each cycle completes, the system resets through replacement rather than repetition. The next stem follows the same sequence, supported by the same root system and shaped by the same conditions. This repeating structure allows the banana plant to maintain production without interruption. Growth, fruiting, and replacement remain linked, forming a continuous pattern that extends across both time and space. After harvest, the banana continues to change through processes that were already underway while it was still on the plant. Nothing new needs to be added from the outside. The fruit carries everything it needs, and it responds to the conditions around it. A key part of this process involves ethylene, a gas the fruit produces naturally. As ethylene builds, it signals the fruit to begin ripening. This does not happen in isolation. One banana can influence another, and a group of bananas will often begin changing together as ethylene spreads through the surrounding air. Temperature plays a quiet but steady role in how quickly this happens. In warmer conditions, the changes move faster. In cooler conditions, they slow down. This allows the pace of ripening to be adjusted without interfering with the fruit itself. When bananas are moved after harvest, they are kept within a narrow temperature range to hold them in a stable state. This prevents it from moving too quickly before the fruit reaches its destination. Once they arrive, conditions can be adjusted to allow ripening to begin. As the shift starts, several changes unfold at the same time. The green color fades as chlorophyll breaks down, revealing the yellow tones beneath. Inside the fruit, starch is gradually converted into sugar. The texture softens as the internal structure loosens. These changes do not happen evenly from the outside inward. The fruit responds as a whole, but small differences can appear depending on how it is handled and the conditions it experiences. A slight impact or pressure point can cause one area to soften more quickly than another. The peel reflects what is happening inside. As ripening continues, small dark areas may appear where breakdown has progressed further. These marks follow the same process as the rest of the fruit, only at a slightly faster pace. Storage continues to influence it, even after ripening begins. Cooler temperatures slow the changes, allowing the fruit to remain usable for a longer period. Warmer conditions allow it to continue, moving the fruit toward a softer stage more quickly. Bananas also respond to the presence of other fruits. Some release ethylene in larger amounts, which can speed up ripening. Others have little effect. The surrounding environment becomes part of it, shaping how quickly changes unfold. Because of this, the timing of each stage matters. The fruit develops in one place, is moved while still firm, and then completes its ripening somewhere else. Each step follows the last, creating a sequence that depends on careful timing rather than force. The fruit itself carries the record of these stages. Its structure forms on the plant, its composition shifts after harvest, and its final state reflects how those changes were guided along the way. From the outside, this process appears simple. The fruit changes color, softens, and becomes sweeter. Behind that simplicity is a steady progression shaped by internal signals and surrounding conditions moving forward. Bananas move through this stage as part of a larger system that depends on consistency. The fruit changes after harvest, but the conditions guiding those changes remain controlled. Temperature, air movement, and timing all work together to keep it aligned with where the fruit needs to be next. Once ripening begins, it cannot be reversed. The fruit continues along the same path, with each stage following the last. This is why timing matters so much. The point at which ripening starts determines how the fruit will arrive and how long it will remain usable. Different stages of ripeness serve different purposes. A firmer banana holds its structure and is less sensitive to handling. A softer banana has already shifted toward sugar and breaks down more easily. The choice between them depends on when the fruit will be used. The change from starch to sugar affects more than taste. It alters how the fruit behaves when eaten and how it interacts with digestion. Earlier stages provide a slower release of energy, while later stages offer quicker availability. The structure remains the same, but the balance inside shifts. This shift continues until the fruit reaches a point where the internal structure can no longer hold itself in the same way. At that stage, the texture becomes very soft, and the outer peel shows more visible signs of breakdown. The process does not stop. It moves forward until the structure no longer maintains its form. Throughout this sequence, the fruit responds to its surroundings. Warmer air moves it along faster. Cooler air slows it. Contact with other fruit can influence timing. Small differences in environment create small differences in outcome. Because bananas are handled in large volumes, consistency becomes the goal. Each batch is managed to reach a similar stage at the same time. This allows distribution to remain predictable and reduces variation at the point of sale. The system that supports this does not rely on forcing the fruit to behave differently. It works by guiding what is already happening. The fruit follows its natural process, and the conditions around it are adjusted to match the desired timing. Even after reaching the point where it is ready to be eaten, the banana continues to change. The sugars remain, but the structure weakens further. The peel darkens, and the internal texture becomes less stable. This stage is still part of the same sequence. Across all of these changes, the pattern remains consistent. The fruit develops on the plant, is removed while still firm, and completes its transformation after harvest. Each stage connects to the next, forming a sequence shaped by timing and environment. The movement of bananas from one region to another depends on how this sequence is timed across distance. The plant remains rooted in a specific climate, but the fruit is expected to arrive in places where those conditions do not exist. This gap is managed through careful control rather than speed. Harvest begins when the fruit has reached full size but has not yet started to soften. At this point, the internal structure is stable enough to handle cutting, lifting, and transport. The bunch is removed from the plant and separated into smaller groups for easier handling. These groups are then prepared for movement. Surfaces are kept clean, and damaged fruit is removed to prevent uneven changes within the batch. The goal is to keep each group as consistent as possible before it enters the next stage. Temperature is lowered soon after harvest to slow internal activity. This does not stop ripening, but it delays the changes that lead to softening. The fruit remains firm while it is moved through the system, allowing it to travel without losing its structure. Transport takes place over land and water, depending on the distance. Large shipments move in controlled environments, where temperature and airflow are maintained within a narrow range. This keeps the fruit in a stable condition for extended periods. Time remains a constant factor. Even under controlled conditions, the fruit continues to change at a slow rate. The length of transport must match the stage at which the fruit was harvested. If the timing is off, the fruit may arrive too early or too late in its development. When the fruit reaches its destination, it enters a different environment designed to restart the ripening process. Conditions are adjusted to allow ethylene to build and trigger the next stage. This shift is deliberate, moving the fruit from a stable state into active change. The response is gradual, color begins to shift, and the internal structure starts to soften. Because the fruit was held in a controlled state during transport, this change can be timed to match when it will be needed. Distribution follows this stage. The fruit moves from controlled environments into retail spaces, where conditions are less precise. At this point, the remaining changes occur more freely, influenced by surrounding temperature and handling. Throughout this process, the goal remains consistency. Each stage is managed to keep the fruit aligned with expected timing. Variation is reduced as much as possible so that the fruit reaches a similar condition across different locations. This system depends on coordination rather than speed. Each step is connected to the next, and delays at one stage affect the outcome of the following stages. The process works because each part is aligned with the same sequence. The fruit itself carries through all of these stages without changing its underlying structure. It responds to conditions, but it does not alter its path. Growth, harvest, transport, and ripening remain linked as a single progression. Across distances that span continents, the banana follows the same pattern. It develops in one place, is guided through a controlled environment, and completes its changes in another. The system remains consistent, even as the locations change. The dependence on uniform varieties supports this system, but it also introduces a limitation. When most plants share the same genetic structure, they also share the same response to challenges. This becomes more visible when conditions favor the spread of disease. One of the most significant challenges affecting banana production comes from organisms that live in the soil. These organisms can enter the plant through the roots and move through its internal system. Once inside, they interfere with the movement of water and nutrients. The effect develops gradually. Leaves may begin to show uneven growth, and the plant may lose its ability to support normal development. Because depends on steady internal movement, any disruption affects the entire structure. soil-based diseases remain difficult to remove once established. The organisms can persist in the soil even after infected plants are removed. This limits the ability to reuse the same area for future growth without changing conditions. The reliance on genetically similar plants means that resistance to these challenges is limited within the system. When a disease affects one plant, it can affect others in the same way. This creates a need for careful management and ongoing development of new varieties. Efforts to address this involve selecting plants with traits that allow them to tolerate or resist specific conditions. This process takes time, as new plants must be grown, tested, and propagated before they can be used at scale. Despite these challenges, the system continues to function through distribution across multiple regions. Production is not limited to a single location. When one area faces difficulty, others continue to supply the system. This distribution reduces the impact of local disruption. The overall flow remains steady, even as individual regions adjust. The system adapts by shifting where production takes place, rather than altering the structure of the plant itself. The banana remains part of a process that connects soil, plant, and distribution. Each stage depends on the one before it, and each responds to conditions that extend beyond a single location. Across different regions, this balance between uniformity and variation shapes how bananas are grown and used. While large-scale systems rely on consistency, local systems often maintain a wider range of plant types. These types follow the same growth pattern, but the fruit they produce can differ in structure and composition. Some varieties remain firm even as they mature, holding a higher proportion of starch. These are often used in cooking, where heat changes their structure and makes them easier to consume. Others soften more readily and develop higher sugar content, making them suitable for eating without preparation. The difference between these types reflects how the plant allocates energy during development. In some cases, more energy remains stored as starch. In others, it is converted more fully into sugars as the fruit matures. The underlying process remains the same, but the outcome varies. These variations are often preserved within specific regions. Plants are selected and propagated based on how well they perform under local conditions and how the fruit is used. Over time, this means groups of bananas that remain consistent within their environment. Because propagation occurs through the rhizome, each selected type can be maintained without change. New plants grow with the same characteristics as the original, allowing growers to rely on predictable results. This stability supports both local use and broader systems of production. Color differences between varieties reflect changes in pigment rather than structure. While many bananas turn yellow as they ripen, others may show red or remain partially green. These differences do not alter how the plant grows, but they influence how the fruit appears and is perceived. Size also varies. Some bananas remain small and compact, while others grow longer and heavier. These differences affect handling and use, but they do not change the sequence of development from growth to ripening. In regions where multiple varieties are grown together, selection often depends on purpose. A firmer variety may be chosen for cooking, while a softer one is used for eating fresh. This allows the same plant system to support different roles within daily use. Despite this diversity, the structure of the plant remains unchanged. Each variety grows from a rhizome, forms a pseudostem, produces fruit once, and is replaced. The differences appear in the fruit, not in the system that creates it. This range of outcomes shows how a single plant system can produce many results. The same sequence leads to fruit that varies in taste, texture, and use. The variation is shaped by selection and environment rather than by a change in the underlying system. Across all of these forms, the banana remains part of a repeating cycle. Growth leads to fruit, fruit leads to harvest, and harvest leads to replacement. Each stage connects to the next, maintaining continuity across different conditions and uses. The role of bananas within daily use reflects how easily this system integrates into regular patterns. The fruit requires little preparation and can be consumed at different stages depending on preference. This flexibility contributes to its widespread use across regions. Because bananas provide a combination of carbohydrates and micronutrients, they are often used as a source of energy. The balance between starch and sugar allows them to function in different ways, depending on their stage of ripeness. In earlier stages, the higher starch content leads to a slower release of energy. In later stages, increased sugar provides a more immediate source. This range supports different uses without requiring changes to the fruit itself. The fiber within the fruit contributes to how it is processed after consumption. It influences the rate at which nutrients are absorbed and supports internal processes related to digestion. These effects depend on the same structural changes that occur during ripening. The presence of potassium supports functions related to muscle activity and fluid balance. This contributes to the fruit's role in maintaining normal physical processes. The amount present remains consistent across similar varieties, even as other aspects of the fruit change. Vitamin content supports metabolic activity. Compounds such as vitamin B6 are involved in processes that convert food into usable energy. These functions occur at a cellular level, reflecting the composition of the fruit rather than its external appearance. The simplicity of the banana at the point of use reflects the complexity of the system behind it. The fruit can be eaten directly, yet it carries the result of multiple stages of development and controlled change. Across regions where bananas are part of daily routines, this simplicity becomes part of habit. The fruit is available, consistent, and easy to use. Its role does not require attention to how it was produced, even though that process remains active. The connection between the plant and its use remains indirect. The system that produces the fruit operates separately from the moment it is consumed, yet both are linked through the same sequence of growth and change. This relationship allows bananas to function as both an agricultural product and a regular part of daily life. The plant continues its cycle, and the fruit continues its role, each following the same pattern. Small differences in handling begin to matter more once the fruit has moved beyond its initial stages. While the structure appears uniform, the surface and internal composition respond to pressure in ways that are not always visible at first. A banana can appear unchanged after a light impact, yet the internal structure may already be altered. Cells in the affected area begin to break down at a slightly faster rate. As ripening continues, this difference becomes visible, often appearing as a darker section beneath the peel. These changes do not spread randomly. They follow the same internal processes already taking place within the fruit. The affected area simply progresses more quickly than the surrounding tissue, creating variation within a single banana. The position of the fruit during storage also plays a role. Areas under consistent pressure may soften at a different rate. This does not change the overall sequence, but it alters how evenly the fruit moves through each stage. Even the stem contributes to how the fruit behaves after harvest. The stem releases ethylene at a higher rate than the peel, creating a small concentration point at the top of the fruit. This can influence how ripening begins, especially when bananas are stored in groups. Because of this, small adjustments to storage can shift timing. Separating bananas reduces shared ethylene exposure, slowing it. Keeping them together allows it to move forward more quickly. These differences remain subtle but consistent. The surrounding environment continues to shape the outcome. Bananas can absorb odors from nearby items, altering their scent without changing their structure. This reflects how the fruit remains responsive even after being removed from the plant. Despite these variations, the overall pattern holds. Each banana follows the same sequence, even as small differences appear within individual fruit. These differences do not change the system, but they influence the final result. The balance between uniformity and variation becomes more visible at this stage. The system aims for consistency, yet each fruit carries slight differences shaped by its position, handling, and environment. These differences do not interrupt the system. They exist within the system, reflecting how the fruit responds to conditions rather than altering its path. Bananas float in water because their overall density is lower than the surrounding liquid. The peel contains air pockets that reduce weight relative to volume. This allows the fruit to remain buoyant even though much of its structure is water. The internal structure contributes to this balance. The combination of water, fiber, and trapped air creates a distribution that does not fully displace its own mass. This is not unique to bananas, but it is consistent across them due to their uniform structure. Bruising follows a different principle. The fruit softens as ripening progresses, and the internal cells become more vulnerable to pressure. When force is applied, even lightly, cell walls break in that area. This releases enzymes that accelerate breakdown locally. The result is not immediate. The affected area continues along the same ripening path, but at a faster rate. This is why bruises often appear after some time has passed, rather than at the moment of impact. Temperature outside the suitable range creates another type of disruption. When bananas are exposed to cold conditions below a certain threshold, the internal processes do not slow in a balanced way. Instead, they become irregular. This leads to what is known as chilling injury. Chilling injury affects both appearance and texture. The peel may develop a dull or grey tone rather than a clear yellow. The internal structure may fail to soften evenly. These changes reflect a disruption in how enzymes function under low temperatures. Because of this, storage conditions must remain within a narrow range. The goal is not simply to slow ripening, but to preserve the sequence of changes. Cooling too much interferes with that sequence. Ripening environments are designed to control this balance. Ethylene levels are introduced at a specific stage, and temperature is adjusted to support a steady response. Airflow is also managed to keep conditions consistent across the entire batch. This creates uniform ripening across large volumes of fruit. Each banana responds in a similar way because the surrounding conditions are controlled to match its internal processes. Timing within this system remains precise. Fruit harvested at the same stage must reach the same stage again at the destination. Small differences in temperature or delay can shift this alignment. The process depends on coordination rather than correction. Once ripening begins, it cannot be reversed. Each stage leads into the next. Bananas also continue to respond to their environment after reaching the point where they are ready to eat. Exposure to higher temperatures speeds the final stages. Cooler conditions extend them. Decomposition follows the same pattern as ripening, continuing the breakdown of structure. The fruit softens further, and sugars remain, while the supporting structure weakens. This stage returns organic material to the environment. Banana peels break down quickly compared to more rigid plant materials. Their composition allows microorganisms to act on them without resistance. As they decompose, they return nutrients such as potassium to the soil. This process connects the end of the fruit's life back to the conditions that support new growth. Organic material becomes part of the soil system again, contributing to future plant development. Beyond the fruit itself, other parts of the banana plant are also used. The large leaves provide a flexible surface that resists water and can be used to wrap or hold food. This use does not require processing, only the natural properties of the leaf. Fibers from the plant can be separated and used to produce materials such as paper or textiles. These fibers come from the same structures that support rapid growth. Their strength reflects how the plant organizes its tissues. The root system contributes to the surrounding environment by stabilizing soil. As roots spread, they hold soil in place and reduce movement caused by water. This helps limit erosion, especially in areas with heavy rainfall. The presence of banana plants can also influence local conditions. The large leaves create shade and reduce direct exposure to sunlight at the ground level. This affects moisture retention and temperature near the soil surface. These effects extend beyond the plant itself. The environment around the plant adjusts slightly, shaped by the same structures that support its growth. These interactions extend into how the plant behaves over longer periods. The banana system does not reset between cycles. It carries forward through the same root structure, with each new stem shaped by the conditions already present in the soil. The rhizome stores energy that supports early growth in each new shoot. Before the leaves fully expand, this stored energy allows the plant to begin developing without relying entirely on current conditions. As leaves form and begin producing energy, the balance shifts back toward active growth. This exchange between stored energy and new production remains consistent across cycles. It allows the plant to maintain continuity, even when conditions fluctuate. The sequence holds, and each stage connects to the next. As the plant matures within a given location, its root system expands further into the soil. This increases its ability to access water and nutrients across a wider area. A more established root system reduces sensitivity to short changes in surface conditions. Younger plants respond more directly to immediate conditions. With less developed roots, they rely more on the upper layers of soil. This can lead to faster changes in growth rate when moisture or temperature shifts. This difference between younger and more established plants creates variation within the same field. Some stems develop under more stable support, while others respond more quickly to change. The system remains consistent, but the pace varies. Water movement through the plant continues to link all stages together. From the roots to the leaves, the flow supports both structure and function. This movement also drives processes that maintain firmness and allow the plant to remain upright. When water supply is reduced, the effect is visible in how the plant holds itself. Leaves may lose some of their tension, and the overall structure becomes less firm. This reflects a change in internal pressure rather than damage to the structure itself. As conditions return, the plant restores this balance. Water flow increases, and the structure regains its stability. This response shows how closely the plant's physical form is tied to internal movement. Across repeated cycles, the plant continues to replace its visible structures. Each pseudostem rises, produces fruit, and declines. The rhizome remains, supporting the next stage. This pattern allows the system to continue without interruption at the level of the whole plant group. The consistency of this process supports long-term production. Fields remain active across years because the underlying structure does not need to be rebuilt. It continues, adapting to conditions while maintaining the same sequence. Over time, small changes in the environment accumulate within the system. Soil composition shifts, root networks expand, and the arrangement of plants adjusts through ongoing growth. These changes influence how each new cycle develops. The plant does not respond with sudden shifts. It adjusts gradually, integrating changes into its pattern. The sequence remains intact, even as the conditions around it evolve. This gradual adjustment allows the system to remain stable across extended periods. It does not depend on rapid correction. It maintains continuity by aligning with the conditions that support its growth. The relationship between the plant and its environment becomes more balanced as this process continues. Each cycle reflects not only current conditions, but also the accumulated effects of previous cycles. The result is a system that appears consistent while carrying subtle variation within it. Each new stem follows the same path, shaped by the same structure, yet influenced by the conditions that surround it. Across all stages, the banana plant maintains a clear pattern. Growth leads to fruit, fruit leads to harvest, and harvest leads to replacement. Each stage connects directly to the next, forming a sequence that continues across time. The system does not rely on a single plant persisting. It relies on continuous renewal. This allows production to remain steady, even as individual stems complete their role. Through this process, the banana plant sustains itself by repeating a fixed sequence, supported by conditions that allow it to continue. The continuity of this system extends into how bananas are handled at the final stages before use. By the time the fruit reaches this point, most of the structural changes have already taken place. What remains is a short phase, where timing determines how the fruit will be used. A banana that is just beginning to turn yellow still holds more of its internal structure. The starch has not fully converted, and the texture remains firm. At this stage, it resists pressure and can be handled with less care. As ripening progresses, the internal balance shifts further towards sugar. The structure loosens, and the fruit becomes more responsive to pressure. This change is gradual, but it affects how the fruit behaves when cut, stored, or eaten. The outer peel continues to reflect these changes. Yellow becomes more uniform, and small dark areas may appear as the internal structure breaks down in localized sections. These markings follow the same pattern seen earlier, where certain areas progress faster based on slight differences in condition. Smell also becomes more noticeable at this stage. As sugars increase and internal compounds change, the fruit releases a more distinct scent. This is part of the same ripening process, not a separate reaction. The fruit remains usable across a range of these stages. Some uses rely on a firmer structure, while others depend on softness. The choice does not change the system itself. It reflects the point within the sequence at which the fruit is used. Once the fruit moves beyond this range, the internal structure can no longer maintain its form. The texture becomes very soft, and the peel darkens further. At this stage, the fruit is nearing the end of its usable condition. Even here, it remains consistent. The same sequence continues, moving from structure toward breakdown. Nothing reverses or resets. Each stage follows the last. This final phase connects back to the beginning of the system. The breakdown of the fruit returns material to the environment, supporting the conditions that allow new growth to occur. What began as part of a structured plant system becomes part of the soil that supports the next cycle. The banana, as a fruit, exists within a defined sequence. It forms, develops, changes, and returns. Each stage is linked, and each depends on the conditions that allow it to continue. Across all of these stages, the pattern remains clear. Growth leads to development leads to ripening, and ripening leads to breakdown. The sequence holds from the first emergence of a shoot to the final stage of the fruit. The simplicity of the fruit reflects the consistency of this pattern. It does not require complex intervention. It follows a set path, shaped by internal processes and external conditions. This path remains the same across regions, varieties, and uses. The details may vary, but the structure holds. The banana continues to move through the same sequence, from growth to completion, supported by the system that produces it. Across this full sequence, the banana remains part of a system that depends on alignment between internal processes and external conditions. Each stage follows a set order, and the outcome depends on how closely those stages match the environment in which they occur. The plant does not force development. It responds to what is available. When temperature, moisture, and soil remain within a suitable range, growth continues at a steady pace. When conditions shift, the plant adjusts by slowing rather than changing its structure. This response carries through every stage, from the emergence of a new shoot to the final breakdown of the fruit. Each step reflects the same pattern. The sequence does not vary, but the timing can. Because of this, the banana system remains predictable. The same stages occur in the same order, and the same processes guide each transition. This allows the plant to function across different regions without altering its fundamental behavior. The consistency of this pattern supports how bananas are used and distributed. The fruit develops in one environment, completes its changes in another, and is consumed in a third. Each stage connects to the next through timing rather than location. The system does not depend on a single condition remaining perfect. It depends on maintaining balance within a range. When that balance is present, the sequence continues without disruption at the level of the whole system. Within that system, variation still appears. Individual plants respond to their immediate conditions, and individual fruits reflect how they were handled and stored. These differences remain small, contained within the larger pattern. The banana does not change the system's path in response to these differences. It continues through the same stages, shaped by the same processes. The variation exists within the sequence, not outside it. Over time, this means a system that appears stable while constantly moving. New growth replaces what has completed its role, and the cycle continues without pause. The fruit itself represents only one stage within this system. Its form reflects ites that shaped it, from the first stages of growth to the final stages of change. When viewed as a whole, the banana is not defined by a single moment. It is defined by the sequence that carries it from development to completion. Each stage contributes to what it becomes. This sequence remains consistent across scale. It operates within a single plant, across a field, and through S that move the fruit between regions. The pattern repeats, guided by the same conditions and processes. The result is a system that sustains itself through continuity. Growth leads to fruit leads to use, and use leads back to the conditions that support new growth. The banana remains part of this sequence at every stage. It does not stand apart from that produces it. It exists within the system, shaped by the same processes that continue beyond any single cycle. The peel darkens as the internal structure continues to break down, and areas that softened earlier become more visible as the rest of the fruit follows behind. What was once firm loses its ability to hold shape, and the inside begins to collapse under its own weight as the bonds within the cells weaken. Sugars remain present, but the structure that once held them in place no longer supports the same form. So even light pressure begins to change the shape of the fruit. Moisture is still held within the fruit, but it is no longer contained in a stable structure. So the inside shifts from something that holds together into something that gives way more easily. As this happens, microorganisms begin to act more freely on the exposed material, continuing the same breakdown that started internally. The peel separates more easily from the inside as the boundary between them weakens, and both continue moving through the same sequence of change. What remains returns to the soil as organic material, carrying nutrients such as potassium back into the environment where they become available again. New plants draw from that same soil, using those nutrients to support early growth before their own leaves fully develop. The cycle continues through this exchange, linking the final stage of the fruit back to the beginning of new growth. The timing of these stages matters more than the stages themselves. A banana picked too early will not develop the same internal balance, and one that ripens too quickly will not hold its structure long enough to move through the system. The sequence must stay aligned from the moment the fruit is cut to the moment it is used, and even small shifts in temperature or delay can change that alignment. Bananas also release ethylene more actively from the stem, which creates a small concentration point that can influence how ripening begins within a group. When bananas are stored together, this shared environment allows them to move through stages at a similar pace. When they are separated, it slows, and each fruit follows its own timing more independently. Cold exposure below the proper range interferes with this sequence in a different way. Instead of slowing it evenly, it disrupts how the fruit develops, leading to uneven color and texture that do not match the internal stage of ripening. This effect, known as chilling injury, shows how sensitive the system is sensitive to conditions that fall outside a narrow range. Because of this, storage systems focus on maintaining consistency rather than pushing the fruit forward. Temperature, airflow, and timing are kept within controlled limits, so that each banana moves through the same sequence without deviation. The goal is not to change it, but to guide it, so that the fruit reaches the desired stage at the right time. Across all of these stages, the banana follows a single direction of change. It forms on the plant, develops its structure, shifts its composition, and then breaks down as that structure weakens. Each step leads into the next, and none of them reverse once they begin. The fruit does not pause or adjust its path. It continues forward, shaped by the same internal processes and the conditions around it. The outer surface of the banana continues to respond as the internal structure weakens, and the difference between stages becomes more visible as color deepens and texture softens. Areas that once held firm begin to give way more easily, and the fruit responds more directly to handling, pressure, and temperature with each step forward. This sensitivity makes timing more noticeable at this point, because even small delays or changes in environment affect how long the fruit holds its form. A banana that remains in a warmer space will move forward more quickly, while one kept in a cooler space will hold its structure longer, even though the same internal changes are taking place. The relationship between these conditions and the fruit remains consistent, with temperature and surrounding air shaping how quickly each stage progresses without changing the order of those stages. The fruit continues along the same path, but the pace reflects what is happening around it rather than forcing a different outcome. As this continues, the internal balance shifts further, and the fruit moves toward a point where structure no longer supports handling in the same way. What remains is still part of the same sequence, but it reflects the final portion of that sequence, rather than the earlier stages where form and structure were maintained. Bananas also respond to how they are handled in everyday settings, and small changes in storage can affect how the fruit develops over the next few hours or days. Placing bananas in a confined space with limited airflow allows ethylene to build more quickly, which moves the fruit forward at a faster pace. Leaving them in a more open space slows that build-up, spreading it out over a longer period. Refrigeration introduces a different effect. Temperatures that are too low disrupt how the fruit changes, affecting both appearance and texture. The peel may darken in a way that does not match the internal stage, while the inside may soften unevenly. This reflects the same sensitivity seen earlier, where conditions outside the proper range interfere with how the sequence progresses. Stacking bananas adds another layer of variation. Weight placed on the lower fruit creates pressure points that lead to faster breakdown in those areas. The internal structure responds to that pressure, and those sections move ahead of the rest of the fruit. Over time, this means uneven texture within a single banana. The stem remains an active part of this process even after harvest. It releases ethylene more strongly than other parts of the fruit, influencing the pace at which nearby bananas begin to change. When bananas are kept attached at the stem, this effect becomes more concentrated, and the group tends to move forward together. Separating bananas at the stem reduces this shared influence. Each fruit responds more independently, and the overall pace slows. This difference remains subtle but consistent, showing how small changes in arrangement affect timing. These everyday interactions reflect the same principles seen in larger systems. The fruit continues to respond to temperature, pressure, and surrounding air at every stage. The scale changes, but the behavior does not. One often noted detail is the presence of naturally occurring radioactive isotopes within bananas. Potassium, which is present in the fruit, includes a small fraction of potassium-40, a naturally occurring isotope. The level is low and consistent with many other foods that contain potassium, but it has become a common point of reference because it is measurable. This measurement is sometimes described as a banana equivalent dose, used informally to compare very small amounts of radiation. The value remains low and does not change how the fruit behaves. It reflects the composition of potassium rather than any process unique to bananas. The presence of potassium continues to link back to the earlier stages of growth. The plant draws minerals from the soil, incorporates them into its structure, and passes them into the fruit. What is measured at the final stage reflects what was absorbed during development. At the same time, the dominance of a single variety in global markets continues to shape how bananas are produced and distributed. The Cavendish group remains widely used because it can be transported and ripened in a predictable way, allowing to function across long distances. This consistency supports, but it also narrows the range of variation within large-scale production. When most plants share the same structure and response, they also share the same limitations. A condition that affects one plant can affect many others in the same way. This is why disease remains a continuing concern. Soil-based organisms that disrupt internal transport can spread through areas where the same plant type is grown repeatedly. The uniform response allows the condition to move through without resistance from variation. Efforts to address this focus on identifying and developing plants that can tolerate these conditions while still maintaining the qualities required for transport and use. This process takes time, as each new plant must be grown, observed, and reproduced before it can be used more widely. In the meantime, continues by balancing stability with adaptation. Production is spread across regions, and conditions are managed to limit the impact of disruption. The structure remains the same, even as adjusts to maintain flow. The contrast between global uniformity and local variation remains present throughout. While large-scale systems depend on consistency, local systems continue to grow a wider range of bananas, each suited to specific conditions and uses. These local varieties reflect the same growth pattern, but produce fruit with different balances of starch and sugar. Some remain firm and are used in cooking, while others soften and are used fresh. The variation comes from selection and environment, rather than a change in structure. Across all of these conditions, the banana continues to follow the same sequence. Growth, harvest, ripening, and breakdown remain linked. Each stage reflects the same underlying processes, shaped by the conditions in which they occur. Bananas continue to respond to their surroundings even in the final stages before use, and the way they are stored or handled can shift how quickly they move through those stages. Placing them near other fruits that release ethylene, such as apples, increases the concentration in the surrounding air and moves it forward more quickly. Keeping them separate slows that interaction and spreads the timing out. Light also plays a minor role, not by driving internal change, but by affecting surface temperature. A banana left in direct sunlight warms more quickly than one kept in a shaded area, and that increase in temperature moves the internal processes forward at a faster pace. The change is not dramatic, but it remains consistent. Airflow changes how evenly the fruit develops. In a space with limited movement, gases remain concentrated, and the fruit tends to ripen more uniformly as a group. In a space with more airflow, those gases disperse, and each banana follows its own pace more independently. The skin acts as a barrier that slows the exchange between the inside of the fruit and the surrounding environment. While gases can pass through it, the rate remains controlled, which helps maintain the internal sequence of change. When the skin is damaged, that balance shifts, and the exposed area moves forward more quickly. Cutting the fruit changes it in a more direct way. Once the internal structure is exposed, oxygen interacts with the compounds inside, leading to browning. This reaction follows a predictable pattern, where exposed surfaces darken first, while the rest of the fruit continues along its own timeline. This browning does not change the underlying sequence of ripening. It occurs alongside it, reflecting how the internal structure responds when the protective barrier of the peel is removed. The fruit continues to soften as before, but the exposed areas show the change more quickly. The way bananas are used at this stage reflects these properties. A firmer banana holds its shape when sliced, while a softer one yields more easily and blends without resistance. These differences come directly from how far the fruit has moved through its internal changes. Despite these variations, the pattern remains consistent. Each banana follows the same path, with differences shaped by handling and environment, rather than changes to the system itself. The structure forms on the plant, and the final stages depend on how that structure is allowed to change. This consistency allows the fruit to remain predictable, even as small variations appear. The same conditions produce the same results, and the same sequence continues, regardless of where the fruit is used. At a larger scale, this predictability supports how bananas remain available across different regions. The fruit moves through a controlled system, but it continues to respond to everyday conditions once it leaves that system. The balance between control and response defines the final stages. The system guides the fruit to a certain point, and from there, the surrounding environment shapes how it continues. As the fruit moves through these final changes, its surface becomes more responsive to contact and pressure, and even small differences in how it is placed or handled begin to show more clearly. A banana resting on a hard surface will develop soft areas where its weight is supported, while one that is suspended or cushioned holds its shape longer. These differences reflect how the internal structure responds once it has lost much of its strength. The inside continues to shift as the remaining structure gives way, and the fruit becomes easier to separate into smaller sections. The same internal changes that softened the fruit earlier now reduce the cohesion between its parts, allowing it to break apart with very little force. This change follows directly from the weakening of the cellular bonds that once held it together. Smell becomes more pronounced as these changes progress. The compounds responsible for the banana's scent are released more easily as the structure opens, making the fruit easier to detect even without direct contact. This reflects the same breakdown that affects texture and appearance. At this point, the fruit holds less resistance to its environment. Temperature, air movement, and contact all influence how quickly it continues to change. Warmer conditions move it forward, while cooler conditions slow the remaining steps. The same relationship between environment and process remains in place. Even as the fruit reaches this stage, the pattern does not shift. It continues along the same sequence, moving from structure toward breakdown without reversing or stopping. Each step follows from the one before it, and the outcome reflects how those steps were shaped by conditions along the way. What remains after this stage becomes part of the surrounding environment. The material that once formed the fruit breaks down further and integrates into the soil, where it contributes to the same conditions that support new plant growth. This return links the final stage of the fruit back to the beginning of the system. The banana does not exist as an isolated object within this process. It is one stage within a continuous sequence that includes growth, change, and return. Each part connects to the next, forming a pattern that repeats through the same structure over time. At the level of the plant, this same pattern continues without interruption as new shoots take the place of older stems. A young shoot begins forming, while another stem is still carrying fruit, and by the time that fruit is removed, the next stem is already established and moving through its own stages of growth. This overlap, the system remains active at all times, with no single point where production stops. The rhizome supports this overlap by distributing stored energy and resources across multiple stems. It does not direct all of its support to one plant at a time. Instead, it balances the needs of developing shoots with those of mature stems, allowing each to progress along its own timeline within the same structure. As a new stem develops, it follows the same path as the one before it. Leaves emerge, expand, and form the structure that supports the plant's height. Once enough leaves are established, the internal shift toward fruiting begins again, repeating the same sequence without variation. This repetition creates a pattern that remains stable across many cycles. Each stem completes its role once, and the next takes its place. The visible parts of the plant change, but the underlying system continues without interruption. The soil continues to play a central role in maintaining this system. Nutrients released from previous cycles become available to new growth, and the root system expands to access them. This connection between past and present growth supports the continuity of the plant. Over time, the field reflects this ongoing replacement. Some stems are just emerging, others are fully developed, and others are nearing the end of their cycle. These stages exist together, creating a distribution that allows the system to function continuously. This distribution supports consistent harvesting. Rather than collecting fruit from all plants at once, harvesting moves from one stem to another based on development. This keeps output steady and avoids large gaps between stages. The plant structure supports this approach. Each stem develops independently, but all are connected through the same root system. This allows variation in timing without disrupting the overall pattern. As each cycle completes, the system continues through replacement rather than repetition of the same structure. The next stem follows the same sequence, shaped by the same conditions and supported by the same root system. Across multiple cycles, this pattern remains unchanged. Growth leads to fruit, fruit leads to harvest, and harvest leads to replacement. Each stage connects directly to the next. The timing between stems does not stay perfectly even, and small differences in when a shoot emerges can shift when it reaches maturity. One plant may carry fruit, while another is still forming leaves, and another may only be beginning to rise from the soil. These differences create a staggered pattern that keeps production moving instead of stopping all at once. The size of the bunch also varies depending on how the plant developed before fruiting began. A plant that formed more leaves and maintained steady conditions tends to support a larger bunch, while one that experienced uneven conditions may produce fewer hands. The structure stays the same, but the outcome reflects how stable the growth period was. The position of each banana within the bunch affects how it develops. Upper hands form earlier and often grow slightly larger, while lower hands form later and may remain smaller. This difference comes from timing and access to resources during development. Each banana follows the same process, but not all receive the same conditions at the same moment. This creates small variation within a single bunch, even though all fruit came from the same plant. The weight of the bunch places stress on the stem as it matures. As the fruit gains mass, the plant must support that load through internal pressure rather than rigid structure. If water flow remains steady, the plant holds its form. If not, the stem may begin to lean. Support is sometimes added to prevent the plant from shifting under that weight. This keeps the bunch positioned correctly and reduces strain on the stem. The plant continues developing the fruit either way, but support helps maintain stability. As the bunch reaches full size, the bananas are still firm and filled with starch. This stage allows them to be cut and moved without losing their shape. Once removed, they no longer receive water or nutrients from the plant, and all remaining changes depend on what is already inside the fruit. From this point forward, every change comes from internal processes and surrounding conditions. The structure formed during growth sets the limits for how the fruit will behave as it continues to soften and shift. The cut surface at the stem begins to dry soon after the bunch is separated, and this limits further exchange between the fruit and the outside environment. Each banana remains sealed by its peel, so the changes that follow come from what is already contained within it. The internal balance of starch, water, and enzymes continues to shift as the fruit moves forward. The surface of the peel holds its shape longer than the inside. As the internal structure softens, the outer layer may still appear firm for a period of time. This difference creates a delay between what can be seen and what is happening within the fruit. Small changes in pressure begin to show more clearly at this stage. A banana resting against another surface may develop a flattened area where its weight is supported. The inside responds first, and the outer layer follows as the structure beneath it gives way. The color change continues as the fruit progresses. Yellow becomes more uniform across the surface, and small dark marks begin to appear where breakdown has advanced further. These marks follow the same pattern seen earlier, where slight differences in condition lead to small differences in timing. The internal conversion from starch to sugar reaches a point where sweetness becomes more noticeable. The fruit no longer carries the same resistance when bitten or cut. It separates more easily, and the texture becomes more uniform throughout. The smell becomes stronger as the structure opens. Compounds that were contained within the fruit are released more easily, making the scent more noticeable, even without direct contact. This change reflects the same breakdown that affects texture. Each banana continues along the same path, even as small differences appear. One may soften slightly ahead of another, but both follow the same sequence shaped by the same processes. Handling continues to influence the outcome. A banana that is moved frequently or placed under pressure will show changes sooner in those areas. One that remains undisturbed will progress more evenly. Temperature still controls the pace. Warmer conditions move the fruit forward more quickly, while cooler conditions slow it. The relationship does not change, only the stage at which it is applied. The fruit reaches a point where the structure no longer supports clean separation when cut. Instead of holding defined edges, it begins to spread under its own weight. This reflects how far the internal bonds have weakened. At this stage, the fruit is near the end of its usable condition in its whole form. It still contains the same components, but the structure that held them together has largely broken down. The process continues in the same direction. The fruit does not return to a firmer state, and no new structure forms to replace what has been lost. Each step follows from the last as the breakdown progresses. As the fruit softens further, small differences between bananas become easier to notice, even within the same group. One may collapse sooner at the tip, while another softens more at the center. These differences come from how each fruit was positioned and handled, along with small variations in temperature and airflow. The peel continues to thin as the structure beneath it gives way. Areas that once held tension begin to loosen, and the surface becomes more flexible. This change follows the same internal breakdown, with the outer layer reacting to what is happening inside. When the peel is opened at this stage, the inside no longer separates cleanly. Instead of holding shape, it yields immediately to pressure. The same sugars that increase during ripening remain, but the structure that contained them no longer provides support. Exposure to air after the peel is opened leads to further change. Oxygen reacts with compounds in the fruit, and the exposed surface darkens. This browning follows a consistent pattern, where the surface changes first, while the interior continues along its own pace. The rate of this change depends on how much of the surface is exposed. A small opening limits contact with air, while a larger exposed area allows the reaction to spread more quickly. The fruit continues to soften regardless, but the visible change becomes more noticeable. At this point, the fruit responds immediately to handling. Even slight pressure changes its shape, and movement leaves clear marks. The difference between stages becomes less about internal change and more about how little structure remains. The remaining material continues to break down, becoming easier for microorganisms to act on. The same process that began with internal softening now extends outward as the structure opens further. Moisture remains present, but it is no longer contained within a stable form. The fruit shifts toward a state where it no longer holds together as a single piece. This stage connects back to the environment, where the material continues to break down and return to the soil. Nutrients released during this process become part of the conditions that support future plant growth. The same elements that moved through the plant during growth and into the fruit now move back into the surrounding system. This completes the path from development to return, linking each stage through the same sequence of change. The same pattern continues at the level of the plant, as new shoots replace older stems in the same space. A young shoot rises beside a mature stem, and another may already be forming below the surface. Each follows its own timing, and the field holds multiple stages at once. Spacing between plants affects how evenly those stages develop. When plants are given enough room, leaves expand without blocking each other, and airflow moves freely between them. When spacing is reduced, leaves overlap, and moisture remains on the surface longer, which changes how the plant responds. Light reaches the upper leaves first, and those leaves support most of the energy production. Lower leaves continue to function, but their contribution depends on how much light reaches them. This creates a gradient within the plant, where different levels operate under slightly different conditions. Water moves through all parts of the plant, linking the roots to the leaves and the developing fruit. When that flow remains steady, the plant holds its structure and supports the weight of the bunch. When it slows, the plant responds by reducing growth rather than changing direction. The bunch develops in sequence, and each hand follows the one before it. Earlier hands have more time to grow, and later ones form under slightly different conditions. This creates small differences in size within the same bunch. Cutting the bunch separates it from the plant, but the rest continues without pause. New shoots continue to rise, and leaves continue to expand on younger stems. The cycle moves forward through replacement, rather than repeating within the same structure. Each new stem follows the same path, shaped by the same conditions present in the soil and air. The outcome reflects how stable those conditions remain during its development. Across the field, this means a pattern that stays active without aligning to a single moment. Plants at different stages support a steady flow of fruit, and harvesting moves from one to another based on readiness rather than timing set in advance. The structure allows this to happen without interruption. The root network supports multiple stems, and each stem progresses independently while remaining connected to the same source. Across the field, plants sit at different points in development. Some are just emerging, others are forming leaves, and others are carrying full bunches ready to be cut. Harvest moves from one plant to the next, based on readiness, not a fixed schedule. The root system supports multiple stems at once, so new growth continues while older stems finish producing fruit. Each stem follows the same path from emergence to fruiting, shaped by the conditions it develops under. When a bunch is cut, it is usually divided into smaller sections so it can be handled more easily. Each section still holds the same structure, but the weight is reduced, which makes movement and transport more manageable. The cut area at the top begins to dry, which helps limit how much the fruit is affected by the outside environment. The peel stays intact around each banana, so the inside continues changing on its own. As the bananas are moved, they are kept in conditions that slow down how fast they soften. This gives them time to travel without losing their shape. If they warm up too early, they begin to soften before reaching their destination. Once they arrive, the conditions are adjusted to allow ripening to begin. This is done by raising the temperature and allowing ethylene to build. The bananas respond on their own once those conditions are in place. The color starts to shift first, moving from green toward yellow. Inside, the texture begins to change at the same time, even if it is not visible yet. The fruit softens gradually as the internal structure loosens. Because they are kept together in large groups, the bananas tend to move through this stage at a similar pace. The shared environment keeps the timing close, so they reach the next stage together instead of at random. Bananas that reach stores have already been through controlled ripening rooms, where temperature and ethylene levels are adjusted to bring them to a specific stage. The fruit responds on its own once those conditions are set, and large groups are kept together so they move through that stage at a similar pace. This is one of the reasons most bananas in stores look nearly identical. The Cavendish variety is used because it holds its structure during transport and responds predictably during ripening. It allows the entire system to stay consistent from one shipment to the next. That same consistency creates a limitation. Because the plants are genetically similar, they respond to disease in the same way. If one is vulnerable, the others are as well. This is why new varieties continue to be developed, even while the current system remains in place. At a smaller scale, the same principles apply in everyday handling. Keeping bananas together speeds up ripening, while separating them slows it. Warmer spaces move them forward faster, while cooler spaces hold them longer. Placing them in a refrigerator disrupts how they develop, affecting both texture and appearance. Small details like pressure and placement continue to matter. A banana resting under weight softens faster in that area, while one left undisturbed changes more evenly. These differences reflect how the fruit responds once the structure begins to loosen. Even the idea of a banana containing a measurable amount of natural radiation comes from the same composition that supports its growth. The potassium within the fruit includes a small fraction of potassium-40, which is present in many foods. The amount is low, but it remains consistent and measurable. The fruit itself does not change its path. It forms on the plant, is cut while still firm, moves through controlled conditions, and softens as its internal structure shifts. Each step follows the one before it, shaped by temperature, handling, and timing. When the fruit is no longer held together by that structure, what remains returns to the soil, carrying nutrients back into the same environment that supported the plant. New shoots draw from that same soil and begin the cycle again. Bananas that are left on the counter continue to change even when they look stable at first. The color may stay the same for a short time, but the inside continues to soften. This is why a banana can feel different from one day to the next, even if the outside looks similar. The rate of that change depends on where it is placed. A spot near a window tends to warm slightly during the day, which moves it forward faster. A cooler area in the same room slows it. The difference is small, but it shows up over time in how long the fruit holds its shape. Hanging bananas, instead of resting them on a surface, reduces pressure along one side. This allows them to soften more evenly. When they sit on a flat surface, the side in contact with that surface often changes faster because of the constant pressure. The stem continues to influence nearby fruit as long as it remains attached. Bananas kept in a cluster tend to stay closer in timing because they share that small concentration of ethylene. Once they are separated, each one begins to move more on its own. Cut bananas show change immediately. The exposed surface begins to darken as it reacts with the air. This happens even when the rest of the fruit is still firm. The change is limited to the exposed area at first, but it spreads if more of the surface is uncovered. Some people add a covering or wrap to slow that reaction. Limiting contact with air reduces how quickly the surface darkens, but it does not stop the internal changes. The fruit continues to soften underneath. Bananas used in cooking behave differently depending on their stage. A firmer banana holds its shape when heated, while a softer one breaks down more quickly. The difference comes from how much of the internal structure remains. In earlier stages, the higher starch content gives the fruit more resistance. In later stages, the increase in sugar and the breakdown of structure make it easier to mash or blend. The same fruit produces different results based on timing. This is why recipes often call for a specific stage of ripeness. The texture and behavior of the fruit change enough to affect the outcome. A banana that is too firm or too soft will not produce the same result. Even at this stage, it stays consistent. The fruit continues forward at a pace shaped by temperature, handling, and exposure. Nothing reverses, and no new structure replaces what has already broken down. Bananas that are set aside for later use continue to shift even when they are not being handled. A fruit that felt firm in the morning may yield more easily by evening, even if its color has not changed much. The difference comes from internal softening that is not always visible right away. Wrapping the stem with a small covering slows how quickly ethylene spreads from that point. This does not stop ripening, but it can spread the timing out so the fruit does not move forward all at once. The rest of the peel still allows gas exchange, so it continues at a slower pace. Placing bananas in a paper bag holds ethylene around the fruit and moves it forward more quickly. The confined space increases the concentration of gas, and the fruit responds by softening and changing color sooner than it would in open air. Freezing changes the structure in a different way. When a banana is frozen, the water inside expands and disrupts the internal structure. After thawing, the fruit becomes very soft, because those structures do not return to their original form. The flavor remains, but the texture changes completely. Blending or mashing follows the same principle. Once the structure is broken mechanically, the fruit no longer holds its shape. The sugars and moisture remain, but the form changes based on how the structure has been disrupted. These changes all come from the same internal composition. The fruit does not behave differently because of a new process. It responds to how its structure is held or broken, whether through temperature, pressure, or direct handling. Even small cuts or openings affect how quickly the fruit changes. A small break in the peel exposes the inside, allowing air to interact with it and speed up visible changes in that area. The rest of the fruit continues along its own timing. Bananas stored alongside stronger smelling foods can take on those odors. The peel slows this exchange, but it does not block it completely. Over time, the fruit reflects what it has been exposed to in its surroundings. All of these responses show how the banana continues to react after it has left the plant. The structure that formed during growth determines how it behaves, but the environment shapes how quickly those behaviors appear. The same pattern carries through every stage. The fruit forms, changes, softens, and eventually breaks down, with each step shaped by the conditions around it and the structure created at the start. Bananas that are kept for a little longer begin to show clearer differences between areas of the same fruit. One section may soften faster where it has been handled more, while another remains slightly firmer for a short time. These differences come from small variations in pressure, temperature, and how the fruit was positioned. The tip of the banana often changes before the base. It has less structural support and responds more quickly once the internal bonds weaken. This is why the end may feel softer, even when the rest of the fruit still holds some shape. The peel becomes easier to remove as the fruit moves further along. It separates with less resistance because the structure beneath it is no longer holding tightly against it. This change reflects what is happening inside, rather than something happening at the surface alone. When the fruit is broken apart by hand, it no longer separates cleanly into firm sections. Instead, it yields and spreads, following the direction of the pressure applied. The same sugars and moisture remain, but the form depends on how little structure is left to support it. At this stage, the fruit reacts immediately to touch. Pressing lightly leaves a visible change, and moving it from one place to another can alter its shape. The difference between stages becomes less about internal change and more about how little resistance remains. The smell continues to strengthen as more of the internal compounds are released. This makes the fruit easier to detect without direct contact. The change follows the same pattern as texture, where the opening of the structure allows more interaction with the surrounding air. Even as these changes progress, it stays consistent. The fruit continues along the same path, shaped by what has already developed and the conditions it is exposed to. Each step follows from the last, with no reversal once it has begun. What remains at the end of this stage returns to the environment. The material breaks down further and becomes part of the soil again, where it contributes to the same conditions that support new growth. As the fruit reaches its final stage, the remaining structure no longer holds together under its own weight, and the inside shifts into a form that no longer supports handling as a whole piece. The same sugars and moisture remain, but the framework that once contained them has broken down, leaving the fruit fully responsive to even the lightest pressure. The peel separates with almost no resistance, and the inside no longer maintains defined sections. What was once a firm, structured fruit has moved fully into a softened state, shaped only by how it is handled and the conditions around it. The process that began on the plant has continued step by step to this point. What remains does not stop changing. The material continues to break down, and microorganisms act on it more freely as the structure opens further. The nutrients within the fruit return to the soil, where they become available again to the same system that supports new growth. The same elements that moved from the soil into the plant and from the plant into the fruit move back into the environment. New shoots draw from that same source and begin the cycle again, following the same path from growth to fruiting. Thank you for listening to the Sleepy Mind channel. I hope you enjoyed learning about bananas.